Welcome to another Tech Wednesday video. This one's called, Is Your House Poisoning You? I know it sounds a bit sensationalized, but there's some truth to some of these topics that I want to discuss. I think they're topics that are misunderstood, and there's a lack of education from adults and everybody about how it works and how to potentially keep yourself a bit more healthy. And before I get into those topics, I want to say, just reverse disclaimer, nothing in this video is sponsored. It's all paid for by me. I've done my own research and worked with professionals that deal in these fields. So, there's not going to be any coupon codes or affiliate links in this. So let's get started with some of this longer wind discussion. There's going to be discussion about radon gas and radon gas mitigation, PM 2.5 or particulate matter in the air and air quality, VOCs or volatile chemicals in the air, and the use of natural gas appliances and kind of the hot button issue that this has become in many areas. Now, the reality is if you put a box or a house on a piece of property, it depends on where you're at regionally and depends on where you live, what's going to affect you in your home. In the Midwest, if you build a building in some of this farmland or these wide open spaces, we have bigger issues with radon gas exposure. If you're in an area like California where you're more prone to wildfires, or recently Canada, you might have really poor air quality. If you're in a household where people are obsessed with using chemicals, perfumes, like household cleaners that are high in VOCs, you're affected by that. Or if you do a lot of cooking in your home, there's particulate that comes from that, ventilation issues, and of course, if you're using natural gas, it could add fuel to the fire. So first topic is radon gas. Radon gas is a colorless, odorless gas that is caused by the breakdown of uranium and radium in the soil. That breakdown releases a gas that is, again, radioactive, that seeps up and goes into the air. And if you're walking around, the levels are nominal. They're like 0.2 PCI per liter, so it's really going to do nothing to you. And it's just part of everyday life. Now, the difference is if you build a structure on top of that land that has radon gas that's constantly coming up from the ground, that radon gas has to go through the structure you live in, either through cracks or through your ventilation. And what happens with radon gas is it builds up, and those levels can become, let's just say, unhealthy. And there's more and more studies on this over the past 10 years. It's become a much bigger issue as it's been tied to lung cancer. So the first thing it's going to do is you're going to breathe in this gas, again, which you can't tell is there, and it's going to sit in your body, and there's no cleanse that can get rid of it. It just stays in there and can have a harmful effect on your lungs or other organs. So essentially, you don't want any in your house. You want the minimal amount like you were walking outside. And this wasn't really well understood, and it was becoming more popular during the housing boom in like the mid-2000s in many parts of the country, where they're like, okay, we're going to put radon vents in. And these radon vents were passive vents, which sounds really fancy, but it was a PVC pipe that they put in the middle of the ground, in the middle of the basement, dug in, and ran it up straight to the middle of the house to the top, and it would vent out the gas if there was pressure buildup. Well, we found out from those early days that a lot of these vents were put in by plumbers that didn't really have an understanding. They just had to put one in, but they didn't put it deep enough. So it's in like the rock underneath the concrete layer, and it does nothing. It's just a vent there. So a lot of people don't test, and we're finding out now later on that a lot of these homes that had these vents were not working, and they still had radon gas problems. So that's what's called a passive vent, just a pipe into the ground and out to let the gas out. And then after a while, what's become way more common are these active vents, which take care of the same thing. They put a larger pipe into the ground. There's a manometer attached to it for flow rate, and they put an electric motor that creates a suction through the pipe that helps pull the gas out of the ground outside this pipe, up all the way up to your roof and vents out. Depends on where your house is built or how it was built. If it was built when the house was made, typically it goes straight up through your ceiling. If it's built afterwards or you have a mitigation system put in, it runs outside the concrete wall, sealed, and runs up. Depending on the mitigation service, they will seal your sump pump if you have one, put a seal over any other cracks to make sure that the gas isn't seeping in. But once you start to vent it out through that pipe, The benefit of having the suction is it's relieving the pressure under the foundation, so it's not trying to get in your house through all these other cracks, and it drastically lowers the number. And that's something that I experienced in the house that I'm in. And I came in and I didn't even know if there was a radon system, passive or active. And I got one of these meters from Home Depot just out of curiosity before I really got settled in. And I set it in there in a couple different places in the basement. And typically the worst reading or the highest reading of radon you would get, if you have any, would be by a sump pump, because that's a hole in the ground. The other part, or an ejector pump, or you put it by your furnace or HVAC system, it tends to be higher there. So I moved it all around, and I was really surprised at how high the level was. Like I said, outside is 0.2 typical PCI per liter, and I was getting readings of 10 by the sump pump, 7 by the furnace, and the more disturbing part was in the living areas upstairs, where it was 6 or 7, and in the bedrooms it was like 3 or 4. And the cutoff, really, most mitigation specialists say they guarantee under 4 PCI per liter. And most mitigation systems, if done right, can get it way lower than that. So I was really concerned, because once you have it in there, you know, you breathe it in, it's there, right? So you don't want to be around this for any amount of time. So when I had a mitigation specialist came out, you know, I told him, like, look, I'm running this meter. He's like, we're going to set up our Pro one, which is just an electronic version of it that has data logging, plugs it in the place where it's not going to pull a high reading like by the sump. And then I left it there for about 3 or 4 days to get a short-term average. And it almost exactly was the same that my meter that I bought from Home Depot was, this Airthings meter. It almost matched that. So the benefit of something like this is you can buy it yourself and put it anywhere in your home. It'll give you a 1 day, a 7 day, and then a long-term average, so you can see different parts of your house where the gas is or where it's not. And if you don't have any, then, you know, one less thing off your table. But if you do happen to have radon gas in your house and it's at a high level, really, even if you're a renter or you live in a townhouse or a rental home, it's really, really important for your health and your family's health to really consider talking to your landlord about having one of these installed. Because after mine was installed, it went from 7 or 8 in certain areas down to 0.5, almost like being outside. And same thing with the living areas. You know, the bedrooms were like being outside upstairs, and then the living spaces, you know, was down below 1 most of the time. Now, clearly, the earth changes, temperature changes, that rate of gas exposure changes, so that radon level can fluctuate quite a bit, from a little bit to like, you know, maybe even 25 to 50% more sometimes, but it typically trends back down. And this is where, you know, I started to learn a little bit more about some of these things in your home. And clearly the long-term exposure to radon gas is lung problems, right? Breathing problems, cancers, that type of stuff, weird cancers. And it's just something, if you can avoid it, you don't want it, right? I mean, there's no benefit to having it, so getting rid of it is the best case scenario. So that's radon gas. The next one is particulate matter. And this is something that I learned over the summer, because we typically don't look at air quality in Illinois. We know near Chicago sometimes there's an air quality day when it's really hot outside. There could be a bad air quality day, but we got a lot in the summer out in the burbs and out in the rural areas, and it was caused by forest fires all the way in northern Canada. And because of the jet stream, it moves our airflow down here, and we were getting these constant days where, like, hey, you should be careful with your outdoor exposure. And living here, we're like, yeah, whatever, you know, whatever. It's typical, you know, trying to create panic about, you know, not going outside and all this. And then there were a couple of days where I'm like, I'm going to work, and I drove outside, and there was just this haze hanging over everything. And I started to feel it on my hands, on the steering wheel of the car, like this grime. And you could taste it in the back of your throat. And it really was the soot, the particulate from these forest fires that was making its way all over this area and all over parts of the country. And if you're in California or places that are used to forest fires, you know exactly what I'm talking about, plus 10. And you measure that, it's called a PM 2.5 meter. A PM 2.5 is the measurement of that particulate. So 2.5 microns or smaller particulate matter that gets absorbed into your body. And it's about, I think, 100th of the size of a human hair. It's really tiny, but all that stuff gets in your lungs, gets in your body, gets in your skin. And for people that are elderly or children or immunocompromised people, it's really bad to be breathing this stuff in constantly. Normal people, you know, your lungs will get rid of it, it'll filter out. Our bodies are amazing at filtering out things. We could do crazy crap to our bodies and you'll still be okay to a certain extent. But, you know, again, it's long-term exposure. So if you're in your house, you know, that's outside, right? You keep your windows and doors sealed. If you have a newer house, it does a pretty good job. But here's the thing, right? your HVAC blows air through your house. And not everybody has like HEPA filtration in their furnace or their air conditioning. You might have just a really generic filter that can't filter out PM 2.5 particulate, that size of particulate. And even good systems, you're still gonna have a level of it blowing through. And that's what I started finding in the summer, is that this particulate was coming in the house. And typically you wanna keep the PM 2.5 number below 10. And I was seeing 25, 35, 45. And I'm like, that's really strange. I bought this AirThings meter to kind of test that at that point, because I had the Radon thing, and I bought a multimeter that could tell you VOCs, it could tell you radon, it could tell you particulate, PM 2.5 and PM 0.1, and humidity and temperature, all that other stuff. And you could go on an app on your phone and really look at the trends of what your air quality is and what's changed. And that's when I started seeing this. I'm like, it is matching 100% of the air quality days. What can I do? And that's where I thought to myself, I'm like, all right, let me look into an air purifier, like a standalone one that's not tied to the meter, because I didn't want them together. And there's a million of them out there. Thanks to COVID, you have a million manufacturers making these air quality things because it can strip bacteria or viruses out of the air through multifiltration. And I found one because it was made, or the company's from Vernon Hills, Illinois. It's local to me, and it's still made in China, but they made one that I could get same day. It's about $500. It treats 1,000 square foot or a little bit more, and it has 6 different filters in it. And almost all of those can be cleaned. You don't have to replace them, which is the beauty of it. You follow the cleaning procedure every 6 months to a year, and you're not wasting money. The only one that needs to be replaced is the HEPA filter, like most. Every year you change it out, and it actually comes with 4 extra ones, so it's good for 4 years. So, you put it on auto mode, it's got an odor sensor, so it can pick up like foul smells in the house. Like, it's sensitive enough. If you go to the bathroom, and it can pick it up outside the room, the smell from the bathroom. Or if you're in intimate adult situations in a room, it will physically turn on. It's almost embarrassing. So it's sensitive enough to trigger the fan and the filtration on its own based on odors, but it also can be set to look at particulate in the air, which is that 2.5 I was talking about. So even if you don't have a meter, it does a pretty good job of turning itself on when the air quality is bad, and in cycling it through and filtering out that particulate so you're not breathing it in. But what I found, that's a good way to get rid of it in the house. And obviously if you have a big home, you need multiple ones, of course. Can't do the whole house. But what I found is there was definitely a different feel in the air, namely after that time. You didn't see as much dust particulate on the furniture, which is great for cleaning. I mean, it doesn't eliminate it, obviously. Most dust is from human skin and, all the shedding, but it does filter a lot of that out. It gets rid of some of that dust, and it will help for allergies. I'm not an allergy sufferer, but if you have pets, it's another one. It'll help get some of the dander out of the air, so there's the benefit to that. But the big thing that I found was it made such a massive difference. With the meter on the wall looking at the data, I could see how much of an effect cooking was to what the air quality was. And this is kind of going to the natural gas discussion. And the natural gas discussion is one of the most misunderstood things, because a lot of us grew up with natural gas stoves and ranges and hot water heaters and furnaces from when we were kids, and nobody ever talked about this stuff, and we're still around, right? The difference is the output of these appliances, namely ranges, has doubled or tripled. And there's a company called Yale Appliance. They're on the East Coast, and they sell appliances, and they make YouTube videos and talking about these, and they're pretty honest, honestly. You see this in appliance brands, like they have to sell them, so they can't really say much, but they talk about a lot of the practical considerations of setting up a home when you should or shouldn't do something. And one of the things they harped on was, if you're doing a high-powered range with high BTU burners or an oven, you need ventilation. And we're not talking about over-the-range microwaves or just a small little vent. You need stuff to move that out of your house. And surprisingly, when these homes are built with natural gas, a lot of the homes are not built, or apartments or condos do not have true ventilation that vents outside. You might have a microwave over that turns on a fan. That fan might have a filter, and then it blows it back in the house. You might have a microwave that has a higher power, but it only covers half the burners, and it doesn't cover the output from the actual oven itself. So while it might be sucking up a small amount of it and maybe getting it outside, the rest is going back in the house. And that's where this discussion of ban natural gas ranges in the houses have come in. And it's not because the natural gas has changed. There's more. There are byproducts of natural gas that are harmful to our health. There's a wide range of chemicals that are released from natural gas in your home. the reason we haven't talked about it so much in the past is because if you have a properly installed hot water heater with a power vent, it's pulling those emissions of the hot water tank outside of your roof and then venting it in the atmosphere, and that's a totally separate issue. But it's not going back in your home. Same thing with a furnace. If it's properly operating, all of that natural gas emissions are being vented outside the home. But the same can't be said with an open burner layout on your range or an oven. And this is one of the things, when you start to measure what's coming off of these things, it becomes very clear the amount of emissions and particulate that's coming off natural gas in the house is why you should have ventilation over it. Or opening all your windows. And people are like, you know, we've joked around about this after measuring it and seeing more studies on how much is released in the home. People that lose their heat and open their oven door and leave their oven on all night, it's like you're basically poisoning your house with the amount of toxins that are released from the natural gas burning and not having the ventilation. It's like starting your car in the house, but you're depleting the oxygen in the house. You're putting more CO2. The CO2 levels go up quite a bit when you use your range or your oven just naturally, but if you're using it overnight, you're essentially suffocating yourself and ruining the air quality in your house to toxic levels. And people don't quite understand because, again, the big thing, like I think I said this at the beginning, out of sight, out of mind. If you don't smell it, you don't taste it, it doesn't have an immediate effect on you. You're just like, oh, okay, well, it's not gonna bother me. Just because of that, our bodies are super resilient doesn't mean it doesn't have an effect on you or your family. So again, it's about understanding ventilation, the tools you need to look at, and how to properly do stuff. So in my opinion, you know, it's impossible to tell people just to open your windows every time of the year. Same thing with radon. A lot of people recommend, oh, just open your windows and vent the house. The gas will go out the windows. Okay, in the dead of winter when your windows are frozen shut or you have your heat on, why would you want to open your windows? You're just going to let the cold air in and then run your HVAC higher and then continually to blow the radon gas to the house. It's not practical. Same thing in the summer with the AC. You're letting the hot air in, you know, you're venting the house, and the amount that it's going to reduce the radon doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just going to keep coming back. So that's one where you literally have to mitigate it, right? The gas range thing, you know, you may not have a house set up with ventilation, and to run ventilation outside for your gas range can be very expensive because it's supposed to either go straight up or out. And if you don't have a route to do that, good luck. So that leaves you with a few things, basically only opening your windows or getting air purifier devices, which will strip out a lot of the emissions, but you have to leave it in your kitchen while you're cooking. And again, you know, those filtration devices will get rid of the smoke to a certain extent. It will get rid of particulate and will strip out a lot of the VOCs that are created from ovens, but it's not a cure-all. It's like a temporary fix. And I think that's why we're starting to see a lot of areas trying to ban gas appliances or natural gas appliances because, one, the outside emissions, and two, the inside emissions, which really we should have more regulations on. If you put a gas range in, like we've had forever, you should have proper ventilation above it. But again, all these things are all trackable with modern tools. You know, this Airthings meter for radon at the bare essentials is a cheap thing to check your house and you can move it around. The Airthings tool that I was talking about that shows VOCs, like if you're using chemicals, right? If you're using cleaners in your house and your VOCs go from like 200, which is a lower amount, and all of a sudden they're at like 2,000, you know you probably shouldn't be using those cleaners without a particulate mask or a mask or venting your windows so you're not breathing it in the house. You know, there's certain levels of like what's normal versus what's toxic for your body and your family. And these are the things, these are the tools that we have available now with these meters to really test, or you can avoid a potential problem long-term that, you know, that couple $100 or $1,000 of prevention to do something if you're in a house for a long time can just save you a whole world of headaches. And that's what this conversation talking piece is about. So thanks for watching this Tech Wednesday video. I'll see you next time.